Before we begin, the Differently Brained team acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we record, edit, and stream this podcast. We pay our respects to all First Nations peoples and their elders, past, present, and emerging. We extend that respect to all First Nations cultures and their ongoing connection to the lands, waterways, and communities. Now on with the show. Mama! Ooh, didn't mean to do an episode on Mother's Day because it's not actually coming out on Mother's Day. Hello, my name is Lachlan Rutherford. Welcome to Differently Brained. It's my show where I sing songs.
It's my show! All right, mate. All right.
I see a little silhouette of a scent. Scaramouche, Scaramouche, will you do the fandango? Introduce yourself.
This is my new favourite thing. We can never get rid of this. I hope people like it. Please tell us if you like the singing openings. I am Jacinta Dietrich. As Lachlan said, this is his show where he sings songs. And in case it wasn't obvious enough, we have a very, very, very special guest today. We have my mum. My mum.
Hi.
Hello, this is Mum Paula.
Oh, yeah.
Hi.
I forgot. Paula, Mumma P, that lady there, Mum. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I just have to say, Lachlan, I forgot that you were doing the singing, and it is my most favourite part of the show now. I love it. You have to
Excellent.
keep it in.
Well, that's decided then.
We also don't discuss the song ahead of time, just so that everyone knows. Literally, we get on, we have our normal, hey, how are you? We press record, and then Lachlan starts singing something that I have no clue is coming. And every week, I don't think to ask. I just completely forget it's going to happen until he starts singing.
Yep.
And it's amazing. It really puts the pressure on when we alternate, though. My songs never meet the hype of Lachlan's.
Yeah. Well,
Anyway.
look, it's given me a massive grin on my face. It's a great way to start the segment. And
Wonderful.
Not only am I stoked that you guys think I'm interesting enough to have on the show, but I even got serenaded in. Perfection. Perfection.
It's true. Not a lot
Starting
of
the day
guests
off
can
with a
say
win.
that.
That's true, yeah. Well, yes, welcome, Paula, to our podcast. I know that you've been listening to us for a long time now, and we're very grateful for that. But obviously, we've brought you on for a reason, which is to talk about being yourself. and also because it is, at the time of recording, in a couple of days' time, it's going to be Mother's Day. So, yeah, to start us off, Paula, could you maybe, you're not just here just because you're Jacinta's mum, although it helps. Can you maybe tell us a bit about your own diagnosis and identity when it comes to neurodivergence?
Yes, I sure can. It's been definitely a long time to get to the diagnosis that I have now. So I choose to say that I've leveled up. I've either upgraded or leveled up. And my current diagnosis are complex PTSD, treatment-resistant major depressive disorder, and recently ADHD diagnosis. So I identify as person first, but it's been many, many years of getting to the understanding that these are the things that I have. There's been a lot of misdiagnosis along the way. And the ADHD diagnosis didn't come until 2 years ago, I think.
Right. So very close to you as well, Jacinta.
Indeed. I like to think of myself as the trailblazer. I am top shit. You're welcome, everybody.
Correct. Look, it was Jacinta saying, you've got these traits that encouraged me to go and get the diagnosis. I think I've always known, but I hadn't put it into that context. I've always been really impatient. When I see something and it's not working properly, I know how to fix it. Like I want it fixed yesterday. And so there were things that, traits that I've always had, But girls weren't considered ADHD back when I was in primary school. You know, you were just talkative and disruptive and, you know, just generally a bit of a pain in the ass. You were just a bit of a bad kid.
Yeah.
It wasn't really understood that, you know, there was something else behind that. It was considered behavioural.
Yeah, which I imagine really, you know, leaned into a lot of the misdiagnosis and a lot of the honestly unacceptable treatment that you've gone through up to this point, because there was that lack of understanding and that assumption that, yeah, you were just a problem. You're a pain in the ass. You were the issue that needed to be fixed. And, you know, back in the day, the fixing was, and still today, you know, there's a lot of stuff, but it's not so gentle.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There was lots of shaming and punishment, you know, which has really impacted my self-worth. But, you know, that's happened with the complex PTSD too, because, you know, I was born in 72. So Vietnam vets were coming home, and PTSD was only something that was really considered in, you know, those kind of settings, you know, somebody who'd experienced war. So as I
and even then it was stigmatized back in the 70s.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then as I became a teenager, you know, a lot of what I now recognize was trauma responses were seen as more behavioral issues. The misdiagnosis of my PTSD continued until 2008. And and I only found out because I was at uni. I was studying at Southern Cross, actually. I was in the Ginnibi Indigenous part of the school there, and we did the biological effects of trauma. And one of the parts of the course load was the criteria, the DSM criteria for PTSD. And I went through it and burst into tears and went and saw my GP and said, hey, I think I've got this. And that was the start of that journey. But I had definitely had PTSD from probably about the late 80s, I would say.
Okay.
So I was raised in domestic violence, and that's why what I've got is considered complex PTSD because of the ongoing nature of it. So somebody can get PTSD from a single event, you know, a car accident or, you know, something, a natural disaster, something like that. But complex is when you've got repeated trauma and that you're quite helpless to get out of the situation. So it often happens in home environments. You're either a child or you're a partner who's not able to get away. And so that repeated trauma is what makes it complex PTSD.
If you're okay with saying it, what were your misdiagnoses before actually getting the diagnosis of C-PTSD?
Sure. Well, first it was the stigma and the judgment. So I was considered a wayward teenager. I was rebellious. Then I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. And then I was diagnosed with postnatal depression. Then I think it got upgraded. So I leveled up to leveled up in the game of life. I leveled up to major depressive disorder. And then somewhere around there, the PTSD came in. And then it wasn't until I was very, very unwell. My last really bad episode was in 2020. And I had a hospital stay, an inpatient psychiatric hospital stay for 3 weeks. And then that was when I leveled up to the top level, which is treatment-resistant major depressive disorder and the complex PTSD.
There was also definitely parts that I remember. I don't know when in the timeline that was, but I remember when there wasn't enough help and support for you and you were trying to figure stuff out. You were looking into, you know, bipolar and borderline personality disorder and literally anything that might give us an answer as well. And I know that, you know, those were thrown around sometime, not officially diagnosed, but thrown around in the mix of like, maybe this is it kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the stuff that I've learned while I've been going through this process is that there is a very strong overlap between complex PTSD and borderline personality disorder. And I think that out of the 9 traits that they're looking for, there's at least 4 for me that are overlapping. So it can be tricky because there's a lot of conditions that have similar presentations, that they have similar, experiences.
Yeah.
It's like bipolar and ADHD, how they're often misdiagnosed as each other. And like the thing with that as well, PTSD, from what I have learned what we've learned from people on the show and just wider reading and stuff, is that the treatment and approach to C-PTSD is completely different to that with PTSD. Like they're 2 completely different situations. And so to be treated for one for such a long time and then it ends up being something else, that's got to be jarring, but then also kind of, I don't know, was it a affirming weight off shoulders moment for you once you actually got that diagnosis of C-PTSD?
Yes and no. Well, originally I just cried a lot, Lachlan. Originally I just went, oh my goodness, this is what's wrong with me. And it was quite sad. I don't know if part of that was releasing all of that emotion, but just that distress that my mental health issues had been instigated by situations that were out of my control, that had kind of happened to me. There was a fair bit of feeling victimized there at the start. Why me? And this is unfair and those kinds of things. And it's been very tricky to then tease that apart. It's like a ball of wool that your cat's got a hold of, and instead of it just unraveling really easy, there's like knots and shit all the way through it, and there's a bit of hair and, going through that process of recognizing I think and feel these ways about myself, but that's been put onto me. It's a result of those situations and not necessarily how I see myself.
Yeah.
So it's been tricky, but it's made me very passionate about, improving the lives for people who have complex PTSD and personality disorders, because there's a hell of a lot of stigma. A hell of a lot of stigma.
I want to ask, and I didn't put this in the previous question, so you can tell me to go away, but of everyone I know, and I guess, it is easier for me because, you're my mum, I see it all kind of thing. You've gone through the most different treatments and counseling and working on yourself and every bloody possible thing to unravel that hairy, gunky ball of wool. And you're probably mentally the healthiest I've ever known you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. I'm very proud of all the work that you've done to get yourself there, not to get too mushy on the show. We both know I'm not a big mush. But I wanted to ask, what's working for you now? Because there's clearly been a change and you do have better support and different treatments and the correct diagnosis and stuff like that. What's changed for you now compared to 5, 10, 15 years ago?
Wow. Okay. That's a big question. I'm going to break it down into chunks. No, it's fine. I think that one of the biggest changes for me was leaving New South Wales and coming into Victoria. After living in both states, the public mental health system in New South Wales, rural New South Wales, and in particular Northern Rivers, was atrocious.
Yeah.
I really was treated badly when I was seeking help up there. Victoria, I don't know if it's because it's a smaller state, because it's run by a different government, but there was a lot more support, public support here, public health support, than what I've ever got in New South Wales. I think that it's a combination of things that have worked for me. So I found a psychologist who did EMDR therapy, which is the eye movement desensitizing and reprogramming, I think it stands for.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that. And that was the start of a huge difference in how I experience my triggers, those things that remind me of situations that, were traumatizing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I found that because this guy also ran a mindfulness meditation group. And so it was one of those more alternate things that I did. And, he pulled me aside and said, look, I think I can help you. So EMDR is something that I've been having since about 2015, and it's made huge differences. So it hasn't stopped me from having those triggers, but it's turned the volume down on them. So when it happens, I experience it at, say, 2 decibels, not 10.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So another thing that I think has been pivotal in my recovery has been a thing called TMS. So it's transcranial magnetic stimulation.
Mm.
So it's kind of the step down from ECT. So you're having electrical magnetic impulses tapped onto your skull, and you just sit in a chair, big comfy recliner. It's a machine that just taps. And the way that it's been explained to me is that the depression part of your brain has slowed down or it's stopped working.
Right.
It's a bit like you've got your Christmas lights and the blue one doesn't turn on.
Yeah.
So by having this machine tap on that spot, it says, oi, you're asleep and you need to wake up. So then that area of the brain goes, oh, okay, sorry, I'm supposed to be turned on. And so it starts to function on its own. And at the start, I had to keep having maintenance treatment because it would start to dim again. That blue light would start to fade. And so then I'd go in and have it again. And we've been stretching it out now. I think it was 2020 was the first time that I had it. And I've actually been 6 months without any treatment now. Wow. Because I think the neuroplasticity in my brain, it's rewired, and it's learnt that that's what it's supposed to be doing. Yeah. So that has been really beneficial.
Just to be clear to listeners, we're not sitting my mum in a chair and doing shock therapy. It's not painful.
No,
we are not, not lobotomizing my mum or anything weird.
I find
it's magnets, it's neuroplasticity, it's all good. I'm not sitting there. Well, I'm not doing it, but no one's sitting there zapping her, just for anyone who's freaking out. And again, to reiterate, this is not medical advice. We are not doctors. We're just sharing a story.
Yeah.
Don't sue us. Don't come for me.
I find this fascinating personally. Well, what does it feel like? Does it feel like anything when it's happening?
Look, it feels like somebody has a pencil and they're just tapping you on the one spot repeatedly. Right. So it's not hard. It goes for 30 seconds and then it stops for 30 seconds. And I think there's something like 26 rounds. So it takes about 40 minutes.
Right.
I can play a recording if you'd like to hear what it sounds like.
I would.
Really? Yeah.
Well, look, I've filmed myself having it done because people do go, well, what is this and how does it work? So I've got a picture of me with the machine sitting on my head. Mm-hmm. So it looks like the size of 2 bread and butter plates together, and it makes like a figure 8 kind of thing. And they just sit it next to your head. So they measure so that they're, activating the right part. And now I'll press the button. Okay. So I'm sitting up in a chair, smiling and recording this.
That sounds awful.
It sounds cool.
Oh, mate. Nah, my sensory, nah. I had no idea. I've not watched that video with sound. I just looked at it and thought, oh, that's some cool X-Men shit. Or I have and I completely forgot. But that would drive me bonkers, Mum. How are you sitting there? Isn't that annoying?
Well, look, it's not for me. So it's got different volumes, intensity, I guess, and mine is quite low. I think mine was like 41%. Okay. So it's not too bad. I normally shove in some earplugs and I read Lord of the Rings.
Great.
Of course you do.
I do struggle if there's somebody else. So they normally have 2 or 3 people going at once. Some of the people have a much higher intensity, and the sound of theirs irritates me more than the sound of mine because theirs is much, much louder. And so if that's the case, sometimes there's TV screens, we can watch TV. Sometimes I'll just watch TV and turn it up loud.
Oh.
Yeah. So I'm really lucky I don't get any side effects. Some people get headaches. Some people, might get ringing in the ears, those kinds of things. But I don't get any side effects other than getting really tired. Mm-hmm. But they tell me that happens because it's working. So your brain's very busy doing things and it makes you tired.
Which makes sense. It's rewiring a bunch of stuff. And like you said, it's functioning off the neuroplasticity of our brains. So it would make sense that all of your body's energy is going into, following those pathways and rebuilding them and all of those weird things that brain matter does.
Yeah. So then I've got a couple of other things that I do. They're a bit more, I don't know, alternate, I guess.
Woo-woo.
Bit more woo-woo. So I've been doing yoga now since about 1996, and I still every Wednesday night do a restorative yoga class. Mm-hmm. And I feel that just that time to stop and think about nothing, just concentrate on my breathing and relax is very helpful. And I've always been a big swimmer, and I've become a fan of the cold water therapy. So I try once a week to go swimming in something that's pretty freezing, either the water down here,
just naturally the freezing, yeah,
at the bay, either at the bay or sometimes the beach. And if I can't be bothered doing that, I'll do a really cold burst at the end of my shower.
Yep.
And that's thoroughly invigorating, and I really enjoy that.
What's the theory behind the cold water stuff?
So the theory is that it is a bit like a reboot where it shocks your nervous system into – so if you're feeling really, really anxious, having a bit of a panic attack, if you jump into the cold water, you get totally out of your brain and you're completely into your body. Like you're grounded.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And so your breathing changes, you get out of your head, you get into your body. Then you have those sensations of your skin's tingling, all your hairs stand up, reduces your heart rate. And, it's pretty much a like rebooting your computer.
Yeah. I've had it recommended to me before, and I tried to during winter, and it was like, well, it's winter, it's going to be even more effective. And I went into the shower and I'm like, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to stand under this water for as long as I can bear it. And I chickened out like immediately.
I was hoping that's where that story was going.
Do you want to know how I started, Lachlan?
How?
I would have a normal shower.
Yeah.
And then I would get to the end and I'd go, okay, you're going to turn the hot off and you're just going to rotate once. Like if you can just have the cold water hit every part of your body once, you're allowed to turn the hot back on and finish off.
Maybe I'll do that.
So I would just hit myself and then go from shoulder to shoulder, like do a full 360.
Yeah, like a
and go, whoo,
rotisserie
and then
icicle.
put the warm back on.
Yeah, cool. Okay, I might try that.
And then you slowly build it up that now you can spin twice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I
hate it. I absolutely will not be adding that to my showering regime, but thank you, Mum. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm glad it vibes for you. No, thank you. What are you talking about, actually? My shower's cold all the time and you hate it. What's your problem?
Your shower has the crappiest pressure I've ever experienced in my life. So it's
always cold, bro.
Well, the temperature is not the problem for me, honey. It's your pressure.
All right. Well, we didn't come here to shame my shower.
Well, you started it. The other thing I should add in is that I am on medication.
Mhm.
I am on an antidepressant of a morning, and I am on a mood stabilizer at night.
Mhm.
And that mood stabilizer has also been an absolute game changer. So because the PTSD can trigger at any point, and I never know when, that smell or that sound is just going to appear. Could be in the supermarket, or I could be at work. There was lots of roller coaster, lots of up and down emotions, and that mood stabilizer has been life-changing.
Do you get any negative effects from the side effects from the mood stabilizer? Because I've been on a couple and I've always had issues with the side effects.
Yeah, no? I've been very lucky.
That's great.
The mood stabilizer has been spot on from the start. I've had a lot of trouble with antidepressants. So the reason that I'm considered treatment resistant is I've probably been on, I don't know, maybe 6 to 8.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
Surprise. My mum knows her way around the chemist.
I sure do. I started them in probably the early 2000s, and the first couple that I was on did absolutely nothing. And then once we'd found something that worked, I usually get somewhere between 4 and 6 years out of a medication before my body works out how to break it down and filter it out. And so then it stops working.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think I'm on my 7th medication at the moment, and I've been on this one since 2020, and she's holding strong. But that's why I need to have other modalities or treatment options as part of my, wellness, because I can't just rely on medication because it's not a long-term solution for me. Having said that, I'm never going to pull it out either.
Yeah.
I've tried going without medication. It doesn't go well for me.
This is a bit of a pivot, Mum, but what's your job?
My technical title is consumer peer worker, but when I introduce myself to people, I actually prefer the term lived experience worker.
Excellent. What is it? What do you do, and how'd you get it? What is your job?
So my job is that I work as part of a multidisciplinary team who care for adults who are acutely unwell in their home. So it came out of the Royal Commission that psychiatric hospitals are not always the best place for people to recover. They can be scary. You're out of your own environment. You have to leave your pets and your partner. And so there's been a new push to treat people who are acutely unwell and need psychiatric treatment in their homes. So the team that I'm in was the first adult one I believe, in the country, definitely in the state of Victoria. So when people are really unwell, I get to go to their house and say, hey, I have a lived experience as well, and I can relate to what you're going through. And I get the opportunity to share the parts of my story that I think are relevant to helping them create a bit of a recovery plan so that, we can start looking future focused and what that person needs in order to create a life that they want to live.
That's fantastic. That's such an important job. And I don't want to throw the cliche out, but do you find it rewarding doing that work? Because I have supreme admiration for people who are in situations themselves, like mental health situations, who are then able to channel that into helping other people. I think it's just, take my admiration, Paula. Take it.
Lachlan.
Thank you.
Lachlan.
Thank you, Lachlan.
You mean like you do with this podcast,
Hey,
Lachlan.
Jacinta.
Lachlan. Just needed to take that moment if you're also doing good too, buddy.
Anyway, the point is, do you find it a rewarding job to do, Paula?
Yeah, I do. I think it's probably the most fulfilling job that I've ever had in my life. That opportunity to say to somebody else, look, I know that you feel absolutely shit right now, but it's not going to stay this way. And I felt like this, 4 years ago, and now I'm here. You can be here too. I'm not one of those people who enjoys chit chat. I don't like shallowness. Like, I want the nitty gritty. Tell me, what are your hopes and fears? Like, I want to know what gets you up in the morning. And this job gives me that opportunity because there's no faking about it. When people are unwell, it's bare bones, warts and all, and I'm here for it. I'm all about it. So it's very powerful, and it's really deep connections with people, and it's a real protective factor for me. So with my depression, having the opportunity to do this job helps keep me well.
Which is really interesting. And I find it, the thing that I love about talking to people whose jobs do connect with their lived experience is that I think there's maybe an assumption that people can't do these jobs because they will be triggered or distressed and things like that. But in fact, more often than not, sharing your story and sharing your experiences and being there for other people who are going through similar stuff is really empowering and affirming and helpful for those of us doing those jobs to process our own stuff as well and support. How do you balance the distressing stuff versus the amazing affirmative side of the job?
That's a tricky one to answer. I think I pace.
Yeah.
I definitely, so I don't work full time. I only work 3 days a week. And that means that the amount of time that I've got to rest and recover and maintain those things that keep me well, I've got a really good work-life balance.
Yeah.
I've got really supportive workmates around. So I work in a public mental health system, and we've got quite a strong cohort of lived experience workers. So we've got a team, and those people are absolutely awesome at looking out for each other and, debriefing and talking about those things that can be distressing at times. So, lots of debriefing, but we are quite protected too in this role that I think nurses have the toughest job in the whole world. I couldn't do their job because there's a lot more. I get to do all the fun stuff, So, I mean, not only do I get to go and sit with people in their homes, but when they start to feel well and they want to get back out into the community, but they don't really want to go on their own and they're a bit nervous, I get to go for walks with people along the beach or go out for coffee and go
be
and
their
do
safe person while they re-enter whatever it is that they want to do.
Yeah, it's like a soft re-entry, that sometimes just going into, say, an exercise class or a meditation class is really hard to do on your own for the first time. So, I get to go along with people and go, well, I'll come. I'll be your buddy. So I think that the impacts for me is much less than, say, what our nurses experience because I don't hold any of the risk. So in a lived experience role, it's not up to me to be making any medical decisions or, having any conversations about, well, no, you can't, you're not allowed leave or any of that kind of stuff. So I get the fun parts of the job. And it's not all just in my team. So I also have the opportunity to go down onto the actual ward, onto the inpatient ward here, and I run groups. So yesterday we did gardening.
Ah,
because one of our, we call them consumers. I don't like that word, and I know that lots of other people don't like it, but we call our people who are staying with us consumers because they're trying to move away from patients now.
yeah.
He's been going around and picking all the flowers out of the gardens and then grabbing the disposable coffee cups and making little vases and putting them on the tables.
Oh,
I love
Putting
that.
them on the tables
That's
in the
nice.
kitchen area and one on the art table. So we planted a whole heap of new flowers yesterday, so that is something that we can continue to run with. So anything that a consumer instigates while we're on the ward, we try and support that and we try and run
yeah.
with it. So, that was heaps of fun. Yesterday was a beautiful day, and I spent the afternoon planting out succulents and flowers and mulching.
Oh, very
So,
nice. All right.
So, there can be distressing things that can be happening within the environment because
course.
these are acutely unwell people, but I'm not in the thick of that. Like if
Yeah.
something goes down, it's my job to just remove as many of the consumers as I can out of that immediate role. Like maybe we'd go out to the garden, maybe we'd go into the therapy room. The nurses are handling that kind of stuff, and it's not my role to be involved in that. I just
Remain the safe space for those people,
yeah,
basically. Yeah.
absolutely,
Which I think
absolutely.
you really do need that separation, I guess. You don't want to be, I think, as the person doing the job, you don't want to be the person responsible for all of it. That's really, really hard. And then also for everyone who engages with you, I personally feel like I need that safe person and the medical person kind of thing. Like you kind of good cop, bad cop, like for want of a better understanding
what
of
you
it
mean,
though.
yeah.
Like you want that person who's always going to be there and is kind of separate from maybe the harder or different part of their treatment.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we've got quite a strict scope of practice.
Yeah.
And there are certain things. So, we're there to encourage and instill hope, and we're very strengths based, but we don't give any advice about medication. We don't intervene if there's any kind of code grey situations. I think that we complement what the nurses do,
Yeah.
Yes.
what the medical model does, and if anything, we support that by taking a different approach.
Yeah.
If I can just sit with somebody and say, hey, you seem really angry right now, like tell me what's going on. If I can de-escalate that person by hearing them, and then that avoids for them to require, more
like heavy-handed intervention.
Yes.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, that's the right word. Yeah, like if that lessens that, seclusion or all of those other kinds of things, then that's a win for everybody. And that's the way that things are starting to head now with this new Mental Health Act in Victoria. The idea is that seclusion is supposed to be phased out over the next 10 years, and that there will be more lived experience people on the ground and less need to use those heavy-handed things that we have in the past. I mean, I'm not saying that those things aren't necessary, because sometimes they are. Sometimes,
But if you have it as
everything
a sort of, I don't know, for lack of a better term, a preventative measure to avoid having to use that in the first place, that's
Yes.
like the point of medicine, really. That's the point of treatment.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
How did you get into this industry? I think there's a lot of our community who would do such a bloody good job in a role like this, Lachlan specifically. How did you find that these jobs existed and find where you fit kind of thing?
I think it came about because my last really unwell period was in 2020, and unbeknownst to me, the Royal Commission into Victoria mental health system was happening the year before. So I became a client of a Nimi National program called Step Me, and that gave me access to a psychologist. And at the time it was weekly because it was COVID. People were really struggling. There was a lot more money into offering services than there had been previously.
Mm-hmm.
And so being part of this organisation meant that as the Royal Commission recommendations came out and there started to be an emphasis on, right, well, we need to change the way that the system runs, I was about to be discharged from this program, and Nimi National had got the tender to open up some of the new mental health hubs. And so they asked me if I would like to be on the interview panel to interview the staff that would be in this new Head to Health hub. So I got paid as a lived experience voice or representative to interview the people who would get those positions. And from that, I got to see what it was that the organisation was looking for, the kind of questions that they asked people.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up starting the Cert 4 in mental health peer work. And then I became a casual for that organisation. And then once you kind of get into that sphere, you hear about other things. So the organisation that I currently work for now had set up a lived experience network, and they were paying people with a lived experience to help them co-design the new government mental health hub. And so I was on an interview panel for a co-design panel, I should say, for about 10 months. And we were talking about, the things that we would like to see in this new hub, and things that would be really beneficial and things that we thought would make it uncomfortable for people to want to access that service.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw the job for hospital in the home come up, and it was 3 days a week. And so the experience that I'd already got, is got me the job that I've got today.
Wonderful. So we've talked about the ways in which your work and what you're doing has been very helpful to people who are quite unwell and are trying to get back out into the world. But obviously things are not perfect. There are many deficits in the way that we treat mental health and neurodivergence in this country. And worldwide, what would you say would be? What would you say? How do you fix this?
Okay.
Tell me how you fix this, Paul.
Okay. I was expecting you to ask me,
Jesus.
like, nationwide how to fix this. And when you said
No.
worldwide, my brain just kind of
Okay.
bleeped.
Well, let's go. Let's step backwards and go Southern Hemisphere wide.
Jesus.
Maybe even nationwide, I guess.
Brother.
I think that nationwide, I think that it needs to be a consistent movement. So, we had the Royal Commission, but it was only into Victoria's mental health. And like I said before, my treatment in New South Wales was absolutely shocking. The way that I was treated saw me on the beach with a handful of medication because I was told that I wasn't the victim, that if I had PTSD, I must be pretty needy, and that this person wasn't going to medicalize my emotions. And I had presented with severe suicide ideation. I had a plan and I was turned away. And to me, that is appalling.
That's unacceptable, yeah.
It's absolutely appalling. So I think that we can't just have these focuses and changes happening just in Victoria. It has to happen nationwide.
Yeah.
And the only way that's going to happen is if there is funding. So, as always, it's about the money. I think we need probably less submarines and more mental health clinicians.
Controversial statement.
It really does come down to there is a movement that's happening at the moment. And if we can keep this ball rolling, I think we can make some massive changes. But it has to be a nationwide thing.
Yeah.
The movements that we've got happening here in Victoria at the moment are fantastic. The other opportunity that I have in my role is to co-facilitate with the education team. So, I go into the trauma-informed care training and I co-facilitate with a mental health nurse and a psychologist, and they talk about the theory behind trauma, and I give real-life examples of, a male clinician that comes in wearing the same cologne as my perpetrator will trigger me. And what you will see is that I'm disengaging or I'm becoming difficult. But what's really happening is that there's a trauma response under there. So, having that opportunity to educate all of our new nurses and psychiatrists about the misunderstandings, I guess. I think challenging stigma is a really good thing. And Jacinta, you were saying before about people with a lived experience being seen as, incapable or, a deficit. I think changing that to see that what we've survived is actually a superpower. Like if you can survive in this society and still be able to hold down a job with all of these other obstacles, it challenges that ableist view, and it shows that we can function and we can do very well, provided we've got the appropriate support and that we are seen as just as competent and just as valuable as the rest of the workforce. We can do a job that nobody else can. There are connections that I can make with people that somebody who has, lack of a better way to explain it, learnt purely through a book, purely through theory. There's connections that I can make that those people can't. And so there needs to be the money there to keep growing this movement. So in Victoria, there's a 10-year plan. And the idea is that all of the mental health reform is driven and co-designed with people with lived experience. So, there's no use setting up services if the people that they're for find them unusable or unhelpful. Like it's an absolute waste. So I think that what's working down here should be rolled out in the rest of the country. The Hospital in the Home initiative that I'm part of was the first adult one in the whole country. And they've just recently opened up a women's facility also. I think it's the Austin in St Kilda. People need the option to be able to stay at home and receive psychiatric care and not just have to be in hospital to receive that. Every psychiatric hospital should have a hospital in the home option.
It makes sense to be in it. Like, if environmental factors are going to be so important to a person's mental health, then it follows, obviously, that making an environment that isn't adversarial or frightening or whatever is just, it makes sense.
Well, that's it. We offer so many other medical treatments in the home that are, I would say, equally dangerous from a medical standpoint in terms of, sometimes you can get chemo in the home, which that is some hectic poisonous medicine, and the risk of infection and stuff like that is so high. If we can manage that and we're not bothering for mental health, again, it's physical health being treated differently to mental health. It's the stigma. It's the undervaluing of mental health. It's, Our final question, Mumma, which I forgot to warn you about, so you probably won't have an answer, but that's totally okay if you don't. What are the best representations in any form of media, so songs, TV, movies, books, anything that you've seen of C-PTSD or ADHD or anything that you have lived experience with? Or if you don't have any representations, what resources have you found particularly helpful that other people can go and find?
Okay, so I did know that you guys asked this question, so I have been thinking about this.
Excellent.
And I don't think I've found any representation that I could say, yep, that one nailed it. But there are definitely some resources that I've found extremely beneficial, and one of them is DBT. So I did the DBT course, and it's broken into 3 sections. So there's distress tolerance, emotional regulation, and I think it's effective communication. And the skills that I learnt in that were incredibly beneficial, and they're skills that I use all the time now and that I talk to people that I work with about. And so DBT, I think, is brilliant. You know, whether you have C-PTSD or you have a personality disorder or you have anxiety, you know, these skills can be transferable into different situations. And I think that it's something that should also be better funded by the public health system. I think it would reduce the amount of people presenting with mental health issues if we just gave them more skills to be able to self-manage.
I'm guessing that's got a website or something that we can link people to.
We'll figure it out. We'll put a few DBT resources in the show notes.
Yeah.
One day when I get a chance to do show notes again.
Very good.
Thank you so much for coming on today, Paula, and having a chat with us. Actually, I do have one last question for you.
Sure. Fire away.
What do you want for Mother's Day?
Oh, actually, I really need,
son.
I really need a new TV, Lachlan. My TV has got the whole middle third, right, is just green lines that go up and down. It's been getting slowly worse, and I think it's about time Mumma had a new TV. So that's what I'm aiming for.
Jacinta, you know what to do.
Thanks, mate. I'm definitely on new TV money. Hey,
you've got 2 sisters. Put your heads together.
It's true.
Look, I'll take vouchers towards the cause. I'm not fussy.
Amazing. Thank you for coming on today.
I was going to say, before I go, I want to thank you guys so much for having me on, and I really want to say how proud I am of both of you for what you've created here. I think that it's beautiful, and I
was
love
going to say the same things to you.
And Lachlan,
yeah,
I've got my eyes on you. This new lived experience movement down here covers advocacy. It covers policy changing. It covers such a wide array that I've got my eyes on you, and the minute you're down here, I've got a job.
Okay. I've been headhunted. Excellent.
Yes, you have. Absolutely, you have.
Thank you, Mummy, for coming on and for sharing so much of yourself. And, you know, you're proud of us, but I'm just so proud of you for everything that you've done. And, you know, I'm so glad that you're my mum. I know that I don't do the big emotional things very often, but I love you very, very much. And I'm very, very grateful that you're looking after yourself and that we've found the things that work for you, because I like having you.
You're going to make me cry. And we all know I wouldn't be here without you, Jacinta. That last really unwell period for me, if you hadn't have moved in with me, I wouldn't be here. So I love you, and you made me cry.
It's a beautiful way to end the show.
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right, guys. Well, you know, we'll see you probably next week.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Catch you later. Happy Mother's Day to people who want to have a Mother's Day.
Oh, my God. Okay, I'm stopping recording now. Do you want to yell your bye, Lachlan, or are you happy with that?
Bye.
Differently Brained shares the opinions of individuals and does not consider your personal circumstances. Differently Brained exists purely for information purposes and should not be relied on as health or medical advice. Because no brain is the same, please consult your healthcare professional for your personal medical needs.